Alright, you fiery fart flavours, and welcome to this edition of Koit On. Today's episode's all about Brexit. And I'm going to be interviewed by Barry Bogrroll.
Koit On! Hello, it's me, Barry Bogrroll. What's Brexit?
Brexit, in simple terms, is the contraction of two words, Britain and exit. What are we exiting from? We are exiting from the EU. So let's define what the EU is. Well, the EU didn't start out as the EU. It originally started in roughly 1945 when, just after the end of the Second World War, a few European countries got together and decided, right, we need to sort things out for the future. Ultimately, that didn't kind of work out, and it wasn't until 1957 when 6 of those countries formed the European Economic Community following signing of the Treaty of Rome. Those countries were France, Belgium, Italy, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, and West Germany, because Germany was split in two back then. So the EU's foundation was all about economics, trading between countries essentially. Remember that. Then, in 1973, 4 more countries joined: Greenland, who eventually left, Denmark, Ireland, and UK. Also that same year, Norway had negotiated to join, but they put their decision out to their voters. The voters overwhelmingly rejected joining as part of their referendum. Interestingly, that referendum result was honoured. In the 80s, 3 more countries joined, and in 1990, East Germany reunified with West Germany, meaning that it also had joined the EEC. But it wasn't until 1992 when the Treaty of Maastricht was signed and the European Union was officially formalised. The Treaty of Maastricht also allowed the fledgling EU to reorganise itself. So whereas it was once just about trading and economics, it then became about communities, it then became about common security and foreign policy, and also the third arm, or the third pillar, being justice and home affairs. So can you see where this is going? A slew of other countries joined, and in 2009 the Lisbon Treaty was signed. What that did was take those 3 pillars that were there previously and merge them into one, so that the EU became this legally recognised entity. It created its own president. It was basically becoming a pseudo country. So that's the history of the EU, but what officially led to Brexit? Well, a number of factors played their part, but essentially the Great Recession of 2009 was probably the driving factor. Countries started defaulting on their debt, such as Greece, Spain and Portugal, which led to ultimately downfall of banks. And because those banks ran out of money, there was panic in the streets and the government had to bail out those banking institutions. Although personally, I think a lot of them should have been allowed to fail. If you mismanaged your money that much, you should have been allowed to fail. You look at retail sector, and I worked in the retail sector. Companies like that go up, that go under, they never get bailed out, but banks have to. Anyway, that's a side note. What that led to is this: because the government had bailed out the banks, they needed more income from tax. And where are they going to get that from? Well, people are already taxed to the hilt and under the financial strain of that recession. So what did they do? They bust shed load of people in, and there came the migrant crisis. People started flooding into the European countries. Trickles at first, but then busloads. In their millions they came. In their millions to each country. And you can imagine that wasn't looked upon too kindly by the population at large. Even if you're an ultra-liberal, you've got to admit that countries were changing culture and values. And ultimately, people under pressure from the recession, people under pressure from their communities changing and from what they would consider people taking their jobs, it led to pressure on the government, and that led to the referendum. Putting it to the people, shall we stay in the EU or shall we leave the EU? So then Prime Minister David Cameron, he'd announced that the referendum would take place on the 23rd of June 2016, and the people went to vote.
How did you vote and why?
I voted leave. And the reason I voted leave is because I believe wholeheartedly that we should retain, or regain, if you will, our sovereignty. No one should be dictating to Great Britain, what our economic policy is, what our immigration policy is, what our fisheries policy is, what any policy is. We, as a people, will make our own rules and stick to them and follow our own guidelines, etc. We shouldn't be beholden to the unelected bureaucrats of Brussels, the EU. And that's why I voted to leave. There's a slew of other small factors, but I'm not going to go into those here. But there you go. The referendum result came in, and to my surprise, actually, I was pleasantly surprised, Leave won. Leave got 52% approximately of the vote, and Remain got 48%. So despite all of the stuff pushing Remain on us, so from the what I would class as the biased BBC and other news media, to the government who honestly, truly backed Remain, and to other organisations, liberal or otherwise, also backing Remain, Leave won. Fantastic.
Do you sit down to wee, or do you stand up?
I think you find I piss standing up.
So what's happening now then?
Well, what's happening now is basically we're stuck in this limbo of we can't decide what to do. We don't know what to do. We want to do this.
We want to do this.
Whereas, actually, the voters voted leave. The question was put to us, do we wish to remain in the EU or leave the EU? Remain or leave? We voted leave, so what we should do is leave. None of this deal malarkey where we're sort of half tied to the EU through the back door, which is essentially what they're trying to do at the moment. And ultimately that means we'll never leave because we'll be tied into them still for all this time. Leave means leave. Which brings me to the silly Remoaners, or their people's vote. We must have a people's vote. It makes me laugh that, because what was the first one? Was that a goat's vote? I think you'll find it was a people's vote then. But you lost. Democracy means if you lose, you accept it democratically. You accept the result, you honour the result. We had a referendum actually back in, I think it was 1975, and the referendum then was put to the people, do you still want to stay as part of the EEC, the European Economic Community, as it was back then? We voted 67% to stay, and it was honoured. Apparently, the No campaign accepted it with grace and moved on. Yet today, with all these snowflakes everywhere and you can't do this, you can't do that, naughty, naughty, everyone's tolerant. Load of crap. Accept it, learn from it, move on. So yeah, we're stuck in this limbo at the moment where half of the government wants to do one thing, half of the government wants to do the other, but ultimately they pretty much all want to, ignore the will of the people or the will of the majority who voted to leave. It seems they want to derail Brexit. Why? It's going to be all about money, isn't it? It always is, always will be, always has been, and will continue to be so. It's always about money. And where do you think that money's going to end up going? It's going to go to the politicians and the bureaucrats and the bankers, and it ultimately won't go to the people. So these Remoaners who want a people's vote, who want to stay into the EU, you're an idiot. You're silly, because ultimately what you're trying to do is to keep the cash flow going to those people.
What do you think should happen?
Well, I think you can guess where I think it should go. Ultimately, leave means leave. And so we should scrap the deal, this so-called backstop deal that Theresa May is trying to negotiate. We should leave on World Trade Organization rules. We should have done that from the beginning. We should have said to the EU, right, we're leaving. If you want to deal with us, come to us. So across that 2 years that have just elapsed, they would have said to us, oh, we still want to send you cars, we still want to send you food, we still want to send you this, that and the other. So they want to trade with us. Do you think they're not going to? We would have started from a position of strength. as it was, or as it is, we sort of went, oh, can we carry on with you, please? That's how it's been. Ridiculous. Ridiculous. Theresa May. Ugh, get out. We need UKIP to get into power. And if things carry on and a general election is called, you can bet your bottom dollar that UKIP or someone like them will get in, because Labour won't. Conservatives won't. And truly, if the result of the referendum isn't properly honoured, as in a proper leave, there will be civil unrest. You can guarantee that. People will not take that lying down. If you think you've seen marches through London, with quite a lot of people about remaining or leaving, you won't have seen anything yet. The yellow vest in France will be nothing compared to what this government could cause if they don't follow through properly. That's not a threat from me or anything. That's just seeing what's going to come. It will happen.
What do you think post-Brexit?
Once all has been said and done, and if we do finally leave, which I sincerely hope we do, I think Great Britain will be in an amazing place. You've got countries like America, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, all committing to say, we want to trade with you. Things will not fall apart. Project Fear will evaporate into nothing. They've thrown all this, the world will fall, the sky will fall, people will fall off buildings, you'll die, there could be no food, there'll be no medicine. Where have we heard this sort of thing before? Always before elections and important dates, isn't it, for the political calendar? But realistically, life continues. If there's a bit of difficulty, so what? We'll step over that little hump and continue. But Great Britain will regain its soul. It will regain its future. And that future will be bright. We'll be free to trade with who we want. We'll be able to repeal a lot of the silly rules from the European courts and whatever else edicts they've sent our way. We'll be able to do what we want with immigration. And ultimately, my views are, you come in legally or you get out. You are deported immediately. We've got enough homeless in this country of our own people. We should be looking after our own first. And then once everyone's sorted, and once everyone's up to a standard of, a decent standard of living, then we can help others. But what do they say when you're going down on a plane? You help yourself first, and then you help others. The same is true of a ship. You put on your own life jacket first, before you pluck people out the water and put jackets on them. Else what happens? The plane crashes, the boat crashes. The same is to be said of a country. You look after it. You look after its sovereignty. You look after its borders. You look after its people. And once you're strong, you can then show your compassion and then help other people. There is nothing wrong with looking after your own. Otherwise, the family unit, what's the point of it? If you don't look after your brother, your sister, your mother, your father, why have them? Seriously, what are we? All just individual people, irrespective of each other? No, we should be looking after Great Britain, and British people first. We're an island. That's obvious, yeah? Another thing that's grated on me for quite some time is how we've treated our fishermen. We've got approximately 12,000 fishermen servicing our country and obviously their communities. So there's a lot of people are impacted. But it's interesting to note that I think the UK keeps approximately 40% of the fish we catch. 60% of it is given away to the EU. That's not right, is it? In our own waters? In the English Channel, 84% of cod goes to France. We get something like 9% or 6%. What? So I'm glad once we're out that we can sort out quotas and we can sort out our own quotas and our own reasons, our own fish. We can feed our own population from there rather than them coming into our waters, taking the fish back to their countries and then us importing it. That's stupid, isn't it? So I'm glad once we're out that all these silly scenarios are fixed. And then finally, the people. Once it's done, and this crap has gone off our television, gone off our debates, gone off the national psyche for a bit, perhaps then people can come back together, Enough of you are a Remainer or you're a Leaver. We're people. We should be that family of Great Britain. So let's get rid of this division, accept the result, and move on. You know, I've accepted results down the years as of all the millions in our country. If you go to a general election and you vote on A or B or C and B wins, that's it. B wins. Be a man, be a woman, you know, accept the result and move on. So it'd be nice, once all this disappears, for us to move on as a country. And let's heal those divisions. Get back to friends again. Get back to people. Because I can bet your bottom dollar, once this video goes out, people will say, oh, I don't like him anymore. He wants to leave. I hate him. Well, that's silly, isn't it? Isn't it? I think that's it. I think it's time to bring this edition of Koit On to an end. You know, I could have taken this in many a direction, but I'll save those for future political videos and streams of thought. But for now, please comment below if you agree with me. If you don't agree with me, you can attack me if you want, but it won't change anything. Please also like, please just subscribe to my channel, and please share. And if you like my animations, go over to the Highest Koit channel and subscribe there too if you want some comedy. But for now, you know what you can do, don't you? You can write properly, cough!